Welcome to the WTR Healthcare Happenings podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. In today's podcast episode, I'm being joined by Nick Kadysh, founding CEO and President of PharmAla Biotech, Canadian Stock Exchange ticker MDMA, and OTCQB ticker symbol MDXXF. Also joining is my WTR colleague, Robert Sassoon, WTR's healthcare analyst. Welcome back to the podcast, Nick and Robert.
Good to be here. Thanks very much.
Good to be here too. And good to see you again, Nick.
Nick, we've had you on our podcast before discussing topics related to the psychedelics industry as well as PharmAla. We are glad to have you back with us today to talk about a couple of recent transactional event announcements, one being PharmAla's newly announced definitive agreement to form Restora Neuroscience, a special purpose vehicle that will lead the clinical and regulatory development of one of the company's two drug candidates, APA-01. The other, the signing of a term sheet to license exclusive U.S. rights to advanced drug development, ALA-002, its next generation MDMA therapeutic, to Jupiter Neurosciences in a transaction valued at over $100 million. Before I hand things over to Robert, could you start by giving us a brief overview of PharmAla and then walk us through what the definitive SPV agreement entails?
Yeah, of course. It's my pleasure. So, look, PharmAla does two things, and I think certain things we're best in the world at, certain things we're just really good at. Half of our businesses, we're the world's leading, in our opinion, manufacturer of MDMA for clinical use. It's not a long list, so it's easy to say that you're pretty good at it.
Right.
But we're the leading supplier of MDMA into the commercial market in Australia, Canada, and we support about 33 different clinical trials all over the world. We also develop novel analogs of MDMA. So these are novel patented drugs that go through the standard sort of biotech clinical trial phase process. And the APA is one of those drugs. So that's what we're here to talk about today.
Great. And from what I've been reading of late, it seems like there's some favorable movement on psychedelics by the federal government, which is exciting. And I'm sure Robert will delve into that. So I'll turn it over to Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And Nick, I'd like to echo what Tim said. And it's always good to have you back on this podcast. And always interesting to hear what you have to say about MDMA and the psychedelic sector at large. Now, you have a more advanced development, ALA
Yeah.
002, which is a phase 2 ready with a selected trial site. APA-01 is a preclinical study. Why was the earliest stage asset chosen for the SPV?
Yeah, a great question. And really it comes down to the structural sort of nature of the asset itself. So, we've built a bit of a name for ourselves as a psychedelic drug developer, a psychedelic drug manufacturer. APA-01 is not a psychedelic at all. It's not a controlled substance. It's, we work mostly in neuropsychiatry. This is more of a neurology molecule. And what we ended up finding was, we would go to VCs and they would say stuff to us like, hey guys, like this is a great molecule, we've got great data, we love it, but we don't want to invest in a publicly traded company. Or the fact that you work in psychedelics most of the time, causes us some concern, and we're sort of unsure about this. That was one. The other thing is it is a preclinical molecule, and we're a small company. There, you can't do everything with equal amounts of gusto and efficacy. And so when we found our partners at Datiba, who are like a very, very capable preclinical lab with all sorts of bioanalytical capabilities, and they basically said, like, look, we'll partner with you on this, we'll advance this program. It was a way to get one of our sort of tertiary programs off of our plate and onto theirs, which I think will actually advance it much faster. And obviously we keep a bunch of equity in the program. So we think this is a great way to sort of accelerate an asset that we just don't have a lot of time to accelerate ourselves.
So why did you choose this particular structure rather than, say, out licensing to a strategic pharma, pursuing non-dilutive fundings like BARDA, ARPA-H, or
Yeah.
the Department of Defense or Department of
Sure.
War, as they call them now? Given
Yeah.
that traumatic brain injury, veterans framing, or developing in-house, what other options were available on the table?
Look, if there was options to just like, get a nice fat contract with Department of War, which by the way, like on the MDMA business, we have a clinical trial that's funded by the Defense Health Agency. So we do have quite a few good relationships there. Look, if that was an option, we would have taken it. But I think structurally it's also, it's one thing to get a contract, but then you have to stand up a preclinical team, you have to do the rodent trials, you have to do the large animal models, so pig and dog. And we were just never going to be in a position to do that in-house. Our partners at Datiba can do it in-house, so it's very, very efficient, both from a capital perspective and more importantly from a time perspective. And so I think the plans for non-dilutive funding are still very much on the table. It's more a question of manpower. Like, PharmAla, for all that we've accomplished, like two patented novel drugs and, great preclinical data and manufacturing and shipping all over the world, we're like 7 people. So you can't do everything. You can't be all things to all people. And I do believe in focus as a sort of a primary business driver.
So was this agreement structured in response to the recent executive order? Was it in the works before the EO?
It was in the works before, but that has like that executive order has definitely given it a lot of tailwind.
Right. So can you tell us a little bit more about why you chose Aluvaris and
Yeah.
Datiba as partners with this venture?
Yeah, for sure. So Oliveris is just the parent company of Datiba. So they are very much related entities. I hope that came out and it was clear in the work. Not related to us, but related to each other.
Right.
So look, we picked Datiba and Oliveris for a very simple reason. Number one, they really are quite good at what they do, which is like the bioanalytical preclinical work that we need to do. They're licensed to do absolutely everything in question. And we had a very high degree of confidence that they were going to execute things very, very quickly. Number two, I think it's a great deal for PharmAla. There's an upfront payment. There's obviously a significant equity stake with non-dilution provisions, and there's a royalty on the back end. Now, I had a question from a shareholder yesterday, like, why is the royalty only 3%? But if you look at preclinical assets that are out licensed, 3% is actually well within the realm, especially considering, the fact that there's an upfront and an equity stake in the business. So I think it's a good deal. They're good partners. The other thing that everyone kind of forgets that when you're doing these types of deals is the most important thing is actually not the top line economics of the transaction. The most important thing is how are your partners? Will they execute? Like, can you trust them? Can you work with them? And we had one really good experience in Australia where we created Cortexa, which is our operating business there, which is a joint venture between us and a company called Bytura Health. That's a great relationship. We really like working with those guys. And I think the best and most important thing is actually like, can we work with these people? Can we execute on the plan?
So I have an interesting question that I'm sure you may have been asked by investors. Pharmala's, you're contributing the molecule, the global
Yeah,
IP estate, the
yeah.
granted back improvements, and ongoing IP veto rights.
Mhm.
Alvarez is contributing an obligation to raise capital it does not yet have. So
Yes.
why did you settle for a 50-50 at siding rather than a majority position with Alvarez earning in upon delivering the funding
Yeah.
threshold?
Yes, you're right. However, PharmAla has anti-dilution provisions and Oliveris doesn't, number one. Number two, Oliveris is obviously the parent company of Datiba. Datiba is going to be doing a lot of the services here at a pretty steep discount to market. And so I think that's very, very critical. They're not just coming with like capital that they're going to raise, although like raising capital is also not nothing. Right? Let's not pretend that this is like bam bam and you're done, especially for a preclinical molecule. However, the ability to get the type of work that we need done quickly and cost effectively is actually, in our opinion, worth more than what we got in the exchange. And the contract provisions are actually very clear. So if they don't execute on the plan in the timeline that they need to execute, either with the funding commitments or anything else, the license reverts back to PharmAla and that includes the development work. So, like with anything else, can you get the job done? Can you get the molecule to market? Can you get it first in human, right? That's what really, really counts. And we're really confident that the Tiba and Oliveris are going to be able to do that with us.
And that time horizon is initially 3 months, but extendable to a further an additional 3 months at your
Yeah.
discretion. All
Yeah,
right.
that's right. That's right.
All
Yeah,
right.
look,
So,
you never know what's going to happen with the capital markets, but it's our
all right.
discretion whether
And just to
window opens.
confirm, the actual threshold funding is about $2.5 million.
Yeah, $2.5 million USD, although, our expectation is obviously we're going to go significantly higher than that. You just want to set a baseline.
All right. Okay. So moving on to the second announcement you recently made, although still early days as it's only a term sheet, can you help us understand how this deal came about, what this deal would look like should it advance to a definitive agreement?
Yeah, thanks very much. So this one is a slightly interesting one to us. We had never really considered territorial out licensing for any of our novel molecules, but we were approached by David Sands, is a banker in New York that we know, and he had a client, Jupiter Neuroscience, who was looking for a new asset in the U.S. Um, and so, we negotiated it out. Look, it's a relatively small upfront. It's just under 2 million in stock and 1.5 million in cash. But of course, as with all sort of these out licensing agreements, Jupiter also has performance requirements. They have to actually develop the asset. They have to do clinical research, all of the stuff. And of course, this is for ALA-02. So look, we thought that at this stage of where the asset is, we thought it was reasonable. There's also optionality for us to sort of sell them the molecule. We're going to be making this molecule for our work in Australia and elsewhere. And so, look, we thought it was a reasonable proposition. Very large back end should they be successful in their development work. But of course, if they don't hit their timelines, the asset does revert to us. It's a license. So look, I think it's a good transaction for us. I think it moves the needle for us in terms of cash flow in the short term. And then ex-US, which is where the focus of our business is, we continue on just as we were before.
So actually, can you run through the rationale from the PharmAla perspective for this deal and why specifically Jupiter from all the other perhaps better capitalized US CNS companies you
Sure.
run with?
Sure. Yeah. And I've gotten that question from a lot of shareholders. I mean, look, Krister and the team at Jupiter came to us with, a credible plan for how they were going to raise the capital in order to do all of the clinical research they would have to do. They put quite a bit of money in escrow, like they really put their money where their mouth was, with a pretty stringent reverse break fee, if they were not able to do what they said they were going to do. And so, again, we thought that was a reasonable and credible proposal. Being a micro cap ourselves, I don't look down my nose at companies that might have thin sort of capitalization as long as they can execute. But of course, we have all of our protections in place, and should the deal not move forward, it won't move forward. We will continue to live. But the other major thing, and I don't believe that's the case. I mean, Krister certainly seems like a serious guy who's
Mm.
quite serious about this deal, and we've continued to talk post-term sheet and move the ball forward. We've got a draft definitive agreement already done. Like, everything is moving in the right direction. The only other thing I would say is this also sets a very nice sort of valuation for the ALA-02 asset. And from our perspective, that was quite important, that the back end value of the asset sort of is set now.
And I guess even if the deal doesn't go to a definitive agreement, you walk away with $600,000, right?
Yeah, not ideal. I would actually prefer to complete the transaction. That is 100% my intention, is to complete the transaction. But yeah, look, this, when you're doing a deal with a counterparty that you don't really know, and we didn't know Jupiter until we started sort of talking to them about this deal, having folks who are that serious, willing to put $600,000 in escrow to close this transaction, that
Right.
speaks to, a certain level of confidence that we appreciate.
Yeah. So talk about the valuation. As part of the deal terms, the upfront payment is about $3.33
Yeah,
million dollars, of
yeah,
which 1.5 million is cash and the rest
yeah,
is in Jupiter stock. Now
yeah.
that's a fraction of the more than $100 million value that have been touted by your announcement, your press release. So how do you get to that transaction value for a pre-end IND phase one drug
Yeah, yeah,
development?
yeah. So there's milestone payments at various stages of development. That's sort of considered in the term sheet, and then there's additional payments post approval as they hit their sales milestones, and then of course at the end of everything else we have a 3% royalty. Again, I think reasonable terms for where the asset is today.
Good. So, Nick, looking out over the months ahead, what are the specific milestones that would tell investors your out licensing model is actually delivering? I'm thinking across
Yeah.
both the APA-01 SPV and the proposed ALA-002 deal with Jupiter. What should we expect to see and by when for each?
Yeah, so look, both have a 90-day clock actually. The Restora Neurosciences SPV, in my estimation, should be fully funded by the end of the summer. And then it goes like, look, that's a pre-IND asset, obviously, so that there'll be about 12 months of IND enabling work that's going to be done by our partners at Datiba, who are like eminently qualified to do it. They do it commercially. They're going to be fantastic. I'm very confident in that. And then taking it to IND. So, for the Restora Neurosciences piece, I think it's going to be a pretty steady cadence of sort of elements that begin to fall into place. Starting, of course, with funding and sort of we formed the actual corporation already. Now we're just raising the capital. We've spoken to a lot of VCs. Actually, the thing that surprised me the most with that one is just how much easier it is to raise money for a non-controlled asset. It definitely, in my mind, it has cemented the fact that this was the right decision to sort of split the non-controlled neurological asset away from the MDMA generic and ALA business. So that's that, and then of course, yeah, the Jupiter Neurosciences deal, which we just announced, very recent. Krista and team over at Jupiter Neurosciences have 90 days to negotiate the definitive agreement. We're working super hard at it. Get that done by the end of the summer, just in time for our year end. And then, of course, we have a lot of actual commercial work that we continue to do. 20 milligram capsules rolling off the line shortly. We have a novel API, ALA-02, that we're in GMP production on. So quite a few sort of major milestones coming in the next little while.
Sounds exciting. I'll wrap it up there. And thank you, Nick, for walking us through both the transactional events that you've recently announced and what they mean for PharmAla. I'll pass it back to Tim.
Thanks, Robert, and thanks, Nick, for joining us to talk about the exciting developments. We hope to have you back on as the story continues to evolve. And as a military junkie, I got to say, kind of at a heartfelt level, I hope that you have great success because it's heartbreaking every time I see the homeless vets on the streets. And I think that this treatment is going to be very, very welcomed.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, industry-specific symposiums, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Healthcare Happenings podcast. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Krista Fitzpatrick.